In example 2, I'm going to demonstrate conditional formatting, which is a feature in Microsoft Excel that allows the developer to set up rules that apply to data stored within specified ranges, and when the data that's stored in a cell causes the rule to evaluate true, then the spreadsheet program will accentuate the data however the developer describes. So in my case, I'm going to be using a spreadsheet called First Pivot Table Demo, and I'm going to provide you with a copy of First Pivot Table so that you can do the same kind of thing once you've watched the demonstration. But I'm going to use First Pivot Table Demo, open it, and when I do, you'll see that there's 24 rows of data. The first row is column headings, and in those 24 rows of data, some of the cells are highlighted in yellow, and that's because there's something wrong with the data in these cells. And this is going to be an issue that we discuss in an upcoming lecture. I'm going to come back to this same spreadsheet. We're going to look at the way it's organized, and this is going to give us some insight into why relational databases are oftentimes the preferred way to manage data instead of a spreadsheet. But until we get to that lecture and begin talking about relational database design, then I would encourage you to look at this data, just examine it, and see if you can figure out what's wrong with this data, why I might have highlighted it in yellow. And if you can figure it out, great. It'll make what we do in a subsequent lecture that much more interesting. And if you don't figure it out, I'll be telling you shortly anyway. But for now, we're on the topic of conditional formatting. So let's take a look at the data, and let me describe what this data represents. I'm pretending that I own a small business. It's a pet grooming business, and I employ Sally, Dick, Jane, and Spot. Each of these employees have a corresponding position, job title, and we're going to pretend that instead of having 25 rows of data, I have many, many, many more rows, 1 million rows of data. And it's come to my attention that Spot is a bit of a slacker, and I become curious as to just how much work is he getting done. And so I could examine line by line the data and find out what services Spot has performed. Well, here's one right here on row 14, and looks like he spent about 12 minutes removing a tick from an animal. And he, let's see, appears here on row 6 as well. And again, you know, we've got 1 million rows of data, so this is just a sample of what might actually be. So too many rows of data for me to just scan it and look back and forth between column B and column I. What I'd really like to do is to describe to the spreadsheet program a rule that it should enforce, and I'd like for it to look down this column, and anywhere Spot's name appears, highlight it in some color that makes it stand out against the rest of the data. And I'd also like to come over to this column and do the same thing. Again, wherever there is a row whose column B value corresponds with Spot, I'd like for the text to be accentuated the same way it is in column B. So it's actually going to require that I create 2 conditional formatting rules, one for column B data, one for column I data, and here's how it's going to be done. First off, I'm going to highlight all the data that I want the spreadsheet to apply a rule to, the first rule to, and you notice that I've excluded the column heading. Then on the home page, I'm going to go to the Styles ribbon, and there's a conditional formatting button, and if I click it, There are some predefined rules that I could use. These work real nicely. These primarily for numeric data. Or I have the ability to create a new rule. Okay, so I'm going to create a new rule. And when I do that, I get another dialog box, and it says, how do you want to create the rule? I have several options. The option I'm going to show you is probably the more difficult one, and that's where you use a formula that you create to determine how the spreadsheet program goes about making a decision. So I'm going to use formula to determine which cells to format, and then I need to provide it the formula. So what I want to tell it is, wherever in column B the current cell is equal to spot, then where that's true, I want it to apply the formatting that I'll describe here in a moment. Now, the way this is written is a bit peculiar. I'm going to type in a formula that's based on the first cell in the range, and then once that rule's applied, it will automatically, in a relative way, apply that rule to all the other highlighted cells. So I'm going to type in this case, equal B2, that's the first cell in the range, equal spot. I need to spell that correctly. It's looking at that literal string value spot. It needs to be spelled like spot's typed in here. So where that evaluates true, and again, it will apply that to B3, B4, clear down to B25. So it's going to automatically, once I tell it OK to this rule, it's going to automatically fill that down, fill it in a relative way. And so where that's true, here's what I want to do. I want to go to the format page, and now I can affect borders and backfill and a number of things. You can play around with these, but what I would really like to do is on font change the font to bold and italics, and change its color to light blue, and then say OK. And so where this is true, I'm going to see the italicized light blue text appear in the cell, and I'll say OK to this, and there we have it. So on rows where spot appears within that range, the cell value is changed to look like bold italicized light blue. Now again, I've got spot's name over here, and the other data that I need to work with that corresponds with the different groomers' names appears here, the service time. So the groomer performs some kind of service. Over here's the actual service performed, and then there's a time associated with that service. And so what I'm going to do is highlight this range, go back to the home page, and under Conditional Formatting, again choose New Rule, and same thing, create a formula. In fact, I'm going to put in the same formula, equal B2 equal spot, and then on the format button I'll go ahead and colorize it the same way. So I'll use light blue and apply bold italics and say OK to that, and say OK to the dialog box. And then what you find is that not only does spot's name get highlighted in, get accentuated in column B, but it also, his corresponding service time gets accentuated in column I. And that's an example of conditional formatting. So it allows you to visualize trends and patterns, or data that a certain rule might apply to. Allows you to visualize that very quickly by changing the way the text looks. And that concludes the demonstration on conditional formatting.